Okay, members, we are going to be lifting the one-day hold on Assembly concurrence file items, so if the following members would please be prepared to take up their bill shortly. Dr. Pan, Mr. Portantino, Mr. Fong, Mr. Cook and Mr. Blumenfeld, Mr. Alejo, Ms. Lowenthal and Ms. Butler, Mr. Asajian, and Mr. Silva. Supplemental files are being distributed, and we're going to take up these Assembly concurrent items very shortly. Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to ask for unanimous consent to Rule Waiver 69 to lift the one-day hold on the following items. Supplemental File 201, AB 301, 202, AB 322, 204, AB 853, 205, AB 82, 206, AB 898, 207, AB 946, 208, AB 1016, 209, AB 1056, and file item 211, AB 1211.
Mr. Allen?
Without objection.
Without objection. Okay, members, we're going to take up those supplemental file items, Senate Assembly concurrence files. From the top, file item 201, AB 301. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 301 by Assemblymember Pan and others, an act relating to Medi-Cal.
Dr. Pan.
Madam Speaker, members, AB 301 extends the prohibition on incorporating the California Children's Service Program covered services into the Medi-Cal managed care contract. There's several Senate amendments. One that shortened the sunset date from January 2018 to 2016 did add legislative intent language that continues the prohibition of services covered by the CCS program from being incorporated solely into Medi-Cal managed care until pilot evaluations can be considered and demonstrate the most appropriate organized healthcare delivery model for these children, and adds a technical clarification to a bill pursuant to the CHIPRA Reauthorization Act of 2009. This bill has received no votes and is co-authored by Assemblymember Logue. I respectfully ask for your aye vote and concurrence to Senate amendments. Thank you.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And for the members, I just want to make sure that since we're starting a new file, that this is the supplemental file on our desk, items 201 to 211. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 56, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 202, AB 322. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 322 by Assemblymember Portantino and others, an act relating to forensic evidence.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I bring you AB 322 on concurrence. This bill requires reporting of statistics on the collection of rape kits by local law enforcement agencies, how many kits are collected, how many are tested, and how many were the result of stranger rapes. This information will be reported for kits collected after the effective date of 322. We all know that there is a tremendous backlog of rape kit testing in California. This heinous crime of rape is then followed by even something I think just as horrible, somebody being subjected to giving up the physical evidence and then that physical evidence sitting on a shelf and not being used to put the perpetrator away. That needs to stop. We need to do a better job throughout the entire state of California on doing that. Amendments also establish a Department of Justice pilot program to test every rape kit collected in the 10 counties of the state. These counties chosen for inclusion in the pilot project are all counties with an arrest rate of less than 12% for the crime of forcible rape. I respectfully ask for an aye vote on this bill that has received broad bipartisan support. I believe it got off the Senate floor 37-2.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 49, no 6. Senate amendments are concurred in. We'd like to welcome to the floor former Assemblywoman Rebecca Cohn. Welcome. File item 204, AB 853. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 853 by Assemblymember Fong and others, an act relating to sharks.
Mr. Fong.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker and members. AB 853 is cleanup legislation to AB 376, the California Shark Protection Act. The language in AB 853 is due to my office and Assemblymember Huffman and his office, along with the sponsors, to work with all sides in order to address concerns. AB 853 would amend Amendments would delay the implementation date for an additional year and a half for all persons in possession of shark fin to July 1, 2013, allow fishermen to donate fins to science as well as consume them personally, allow fins to be observed by a taxidermist, and require the Ocean Protection Council to report to the legislature annually on whether any shark fisheries have been certified sustainable according to standards adopted by the Ocean Protection Council pursuant to existing law, and identify possible chains of custody for sustainable shark fisheries. I respectfully request an aye vote.
Mr. Eng.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I want to first of all say that the amendments are a step in the right direction, and I commend the author for taking that step. But I still respectfully will not be able to support this bill. And now let me tell you why. First of all, this bill does nothing, as I have pointed out continually, to save a single shark. Many of you might be interested to know that in California, 20,000 sharks a year. Madam Speaker, may I have some order, please? Members, if you would indulge me, this is something that's important to my community and all of California. Thank you. Members, this bill, and many members have come up to me to express their surprise when I tell them this, does nothing to save a single shark in California. Currently, Department of Fish and Game issues licenses to commercial and private fishermen that go out and kill approximately 20,000 sharks a year. Now, members, 27 varieties of California sharks are either on the endangered, vulnerable, or threatened list. This bill does nothing, although it could have, to save a single shark. Sharks that are within our jurisdiction and within our purview. This bill does nothing to do that. Secondly, this bill does allow for a revision that corrected an anomaly where someone that caught the shark would immediately be guilty of a crime for possessing the fin. The bill does say that a shark fisher person can now possess that shark and consume that fin. But under existing law, which this bill does nothing and the amendments do nothing to change, still make it a crime for that same person that catches the shark legally. There's no problem in selling the shark steak where a certain type of people can enjoy that, in Beverly Hills perhaps, and maybe in some of the more affluent areas of your area. But the folks in my district cannot consume the fin of a legally caught and killed shark of 20,000 in California. A shark that is already dead, that is no longer swimming around creating to the ecosystem. That very fin, and for the first time in California, it will become illegal to possess or consume a fin that is legally caught and captured in California if you are not the fisher person. Finally, I commend the author for a phase-in period of 18 months and expanding that to parties other than the restaurant. But members, in 2004, this body passed a ban on the forcible feeding of ducks to produce a fatty liver, which leads to the sale of foie gras. One objection ensued from one business in Napa Valley that said it would be economically disadvantaged by this bill. As a result of that, the bill allowed for a phase-in of 8 years. Members, there are hundreds of businesses in my area that will not be able to deal with this economic hardship that we call right now the recession with an 18-month phase-in. And we ask that additional time be allowed for them, as well as the immigrant communities that I think with education and more than an 18-month phase-in will come to understand what this means. Finally, members, I commend the author for 3 years ago introducing on this floor an apology
to Chinese Americans for the insensitivity that resulted in laws that superficially looked like they applied to everyone, but de facto applied only to them. Laws such as in the Bay Area, many years ago, you could not own a dry cleaning establishment that was made out of wood.
30 seconds.
And those dry cleaning establishments, behold, they only applied to Chinese Americans. So, members, I will not be able to support this bill. I think that given another period of time, we can come to a bill that I could support. But as long as it does not reasonably take into concerns the very people that we issued an apology to 3 years ago, I respectfully request a no vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Fong, you may close.
This bill received bipartisan support in the Senate, and I would like to have the same here. So I respectfully request an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 46, noes 9. Senate amendments are concurred in. Okay, pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I am re-referring the following bill to committee. File item 207, AB 946 Butler, to the Local Government Committee. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 63 to allow the Speaker, Perez, to take up file item 5, SB 292, without reference to file, as amended in mock-up form for the purpose of third reading today.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We do object to the rule waiver and ask for a roll call vote.
Okay, Mr. Calderon moves, seconded by Mr. Fuhr, that the rules be suspended to allow Mr. Speaker to take up SB 292. Mr. Hagman objects. Clerk will open the roll. Mr. Calderon asks for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asks for a no vote. This requires 41 votes. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 46, noes 23. Motion carries. Motion carries. Mr. Calderon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Also, I request unanimous consent to suspend Joint Rule 62A, file notice requirements, to allow the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee to meet and to hear AB 358 by Mr. Smythe today upon call of the chair in a room to be announced.
Without objection.
And finally, request to suspend the same Joint Rule 62A to allow Natural Resources Committee to meet and hear SB 870 by Mr. Padilla today upon the call of the chair in a room to be announced.
Without objection. Okay, so we are going to take up file item 5, SB 292, without reference to file as amended. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 292 by Senator Padilla, an act relating to environmental quality.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'm pleased to present SB 292 on behalf of Senator Padilla. This bill allows the proposed Farmers Field and Convention Center project in downtown Los Angeles to move forward in a timely manner and in a way that is consistent with California's landmark environmental laws. Amendments taken yesterday in the Appropriations Committee clarify and strengthen the commitment of AEG to mitigate the environmental impacts of this project. Farmers Field will be the most far-reaching and environmentally friendly stadium in the United States. The construction and operation of both the stadium and the Los Angeles Convention Center will directly create 23,000 jobs, with economic ripples potentially creating thousands more in hospitality and construction industries. The stadium will be built using LEED certified standards, among the most rigorous environmental standards in the nation. But more than that, this bill is unique in the nation. It requires that the percentage of attendees arriving at the stadium events by public transit and other non-vehicle means will be 10% better than any other NFL stadium in the country. In addition, the stadium will be carbon neutral. The greenhouse gas impacts of all vehicle trips to Farmers Field will be fully offset with local projects to reduce emissions. Finally, and most importantly, this stadium will be built exclusively by private funds. Not a single dollar of taxpayer money will be spent on this project. This bill does not exempt the proposal from California's rigorous environmental standards. Rather, it creates an expedited process for any potential challenges to the project. The court process must be concluded within 175 days after the release of the environmental impact report so that challenges can be heard and addressed in a timely manner. In a period when we have struggled for 3 years to contain the damages of the recession, this project is a vital step forward towards recovery. The economic impact of this project will be significant and help create jobs, not just in Los Angeles, but throughout California. The environmental standards are amongst the highest in the nation, and the project will be built in a manner consistent with our environmental laws, which is why the project has received the support of the Natural Resources Defense Council, as well as the California League of Conservation Voters. And not a single taxpayer dollar will be spent on this project. Farmers Field is an exciting project for Los Angeles and California. Los Angeles is a world-class city, and this is a world-class project that will make our entire state proud. Farmers Field will be a symbol for California's commitment to building a more sustainable and healthy economy. It will be a source of pride for our entire state and will be a vital step towards our recovery from a deep and damaging recession. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's not often that I rise to oppose a bill and begin by thanking those who have been working on it. But that's what I do in this case, because while I oppose special CEQA legislation for an NFL stadium at this 11th hour in the legislative session, if you have to do legislation like this, I recognize this is about as good as it's going to get. I appreciate in particular that all the way down from the Speaker himself to our Natural Resources Chair and his staff to our Budget Chair and our Judiciary Chair, folks of goodwill and good environmental intentions and, frankly, very good environmental records have been working hard on this, and they have succeeded in making it as narrowly tailored as possible. So again, if you have to have special legislation to favor an NFL stadium proposal involving CEQA, I acknowledge and I'm actually grateful that it's in its current form, because the truth is a bill that is a lot worse than this, that would set a much worse precedent, that would do more violence to CEQA, could and would have passed this House. So I begin by thanking my colleagues for the good work that they have done. The reason I, at the end of the day, still oppose this bill is sort of the point at which we start. I don't believe we must, I don't believe we should entertain special project-specific NFL stadium CEQA legislation, especially in the very late stage of a legislative session. We've been here before. It does set a precedent. I am troubled by that. And I think one of the other troubling aspects of it is that the need to have a thoughtful and a deliberative and a meaningful CEQA modernization discussion is real. I'm willing to take a political risk and be part of that. I'm not being a purist and saying that CEQA can never change or that maybe we don't need to change it in some respects. I want to have that discussion. But I think when we continue to send the message that if you just come to Sacramento at the tail end of a legislative session and lobby effectively, you can have your project-specific relief. At the end of the day, I think that makes it harder, not easier, to have the bigger and more important discussion about CEQA. So, again, with a lot of gratitude that we're dealing with a bill that is as narrowly tailored as this one, I reluctantly have to oppose it and would request that hopefully a few other colleagues would join me in putting out a bit of a marker here with some no votes. This is no way to run a railroad. I request a no vote.
Dr. Halderman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of SB 92. Generally, I don't care about football unless the Chicago Bears are involved, but SB 92 is not about football. It's about avoiding delays in job creation as well as avoiding frivolous lawsuits. The process outlined in SB 92 ensures that legitimate environmental impacts will be addressed within a time frame that doesn't hinder the project's viability. This is a unique opportunity for a bipartisan effort to help private businesses do two things: avoid junk lawsuits and avoid delays in job creation. For that reason, I respectfully request your aye vote.
Mr. Lara.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of this important bill. I appreciate the dialogue and the comments around this important piece of legislation, but let me tell you, folks in the 50th District cannot wait. We need jobs, and we need them now. My folks in my cities, 50 to 20% unemployment in some of my cities, and therefore this project will bring the much-needed jobs. It's estimated that up to 18,000 permanent and temporary construction jobs will take place because of this project. My folks cannot wait. We always talk about jobs in this chamber. This is a perfect opportunity to support a bill that's going to bring much needed jobs in LA County. And on behalf of my constituents in the 50th District, I urge you to please support this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I too agree that this is going to bring jobs. We talked about this in Natural Resources, that this is about a 12,000 person job project that we're talking about. It's funny that it seems like every September, every 2 years, we talk about a football stadium, because 2 years ago, almost to the day, September 9th, we talked about another football stadium and a CEQA exemption at that time. This one is a little bit different. And the reason I talk about this one is because we're talking about the CEQA process. Now, I support this bill. I think SB 292 should be passed. I think this is going to bring a lot of impact, not just to LA City, but to many of the areas around that. But I do want to talk about the process. The CEQA issue that we talked about in committee and that will be discussed on this bill is something that we should talk about for all projects in California. If we have a problem with the time frame of CEQA, then why don't we get together, like my good colleague from the Marin area said, and talk about CEQA and making it a process that can be streamlined. Make some of these projects move through the process faster so that they can't do a project in a neighboring state in 6 months when it takes us 2.5 years. Why wouldn't we get together and do a bill like that outside of a huge project like a football stadium? But as that moves forward over the next 2 years, I'm sure that we will talk about CEQA more. And as for this bill, I support this.
Mr. Feuer.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. A couple of years ago, as was mentioned, came to this floor a bill that sought to create a CEQA exemption for another stadium. And those of you who were here at that point recall that I vehemently opposed that bill. That bill would have, and did, sweep off the map pending lawsuits and undermine the basic integrity of one of our most important laws in the state. Then came a proposal for a stadium in downtown Los Angeles. And a couple weeks ago, the Speaker convened a working group to see if we could adopt a better approach with regard to the issues here. An approach that would indeed propel forward the jobs that we all agree we desperately need. An approach that at the same time would preserve the integrity of the California Environmental Quality Act. And a proposal that would be involved in a transparent public process. That was the charge. And here we are. And after a great deal of work over the past couple weeks by a very broad group of parties, I'm very proud to rise in this instance as a principal co-author of this bill. And I want to discuss with you why I think this bill deserves unanimous bipartisan support. Jobs are obviously utterly crucial to all of us, utterly crucial. And there has been an inadequate approach at every level of government to spurring the jobs that our nation and our state and all our cities desperately need. And this bill goes further. This bill says we are going to mandate that this stadium, this project, be carbon neutral. We're going to mandate that of all the NFL stadiums in the United States, that those who arrive at this stadium do so not by car, but by alternative means. 10% better by that measure than any stadium in the country. And those of you who know Los Angeles know what a challenge that will be. And at the same time, all of us are committed to this stadium rising to that challenge. In terms of judicial review, this bill preserves judicial review. It shortens the time frame. But it also improves the CEQA process from the standpoint of citizens by, among other things, saying that if you are a citizen in the course of the EIR process and you have in mind improvements to the process, mitigations that might be made, there must be a mediation involving you and the project proponents to try to smooth the way to getting a collaborative response to those issues. That's not required by CEQA now. It'd be required by this bill. So in sum, what does this bill do? The public gets the most rigorous environmental standards to apply to any stadium, any NFL stadium in the United States. The public gets meaningful input into the process. The public gets the retention of a judicial process. And all of this at the same time as we do what we were charged to do when we were convened on this issue, and that is propelling necessary jobs forward at a time when we have to be doing even more. Now, it's been asked of me a lot in this process, does this create a precedent? And that issue was raised on the floor. And I'll say several things about that. First of all,
30 seconds.
The bill is not drafted as a broad bill, and it doesn't of itself create precedent. But as we worked on this, we had to assure that it was worthy of being replicated, and right now, on the floor of the Senate, is a discussion underway to, in fact, build on the foundation of this bill and create the very breadth when it comes to the green economy and spurring meaningful projects with big jobs forward that people on this floor have asked for. Bipartisan support should be gained for a project that has gotten strong labor support, strong business support, and strong environmental support. We need to seize this moment now. I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Norby.
I rise in opposition to this. I've had an open mind for a long time. Maybe I can still be convinced, but I've got some serious concerns, Madam Speaker. One is the tradition, now 3 years in a row, that we seem to have last week's stadium bills at the end of the session. Just before I got here, there was a last week's stadium bill for the industry stadium. And then last year, there was an extension of the redevelopment debt in San Diego for the San Diego stadium, and now it's downtown L.A. It's only Wednesday. I don't know why this can't come up Friday. This is a wharf bill right now. We haven't been able to read the amendments. We're taking the author's word for it of a lot of things that's in there. So I think the process is suspect as well. The deal in L.A. appears to be a better deal than a lot of cities have got. Certainly cities like Cleveland and Baltimore and St. Louis that got the Rams and found they could hardly afford them. There is some public commitment, a $275 million publicly backed bond to tear down part of the convention center. But if the city of L.A. wants to do that, that's up to them. The most environmentally friendly stadium in the world, maybe among new stadiums it will be, but I have to defend Wrigley Field when, 90% of the fans go there on the elevated train since there is no parking. But my concern has to be, are we a state of laws that apply equally to all? Or a state where laws apply to all businesses except those backed by multi-billionaires who can hire an army of lobbyists? And it really is an equal protection argument. I know a lot of my colleagues are going to vote for these to say we ought to get rid of all these laws, all these regulations. But to do it piecemeal in the last week of a legislative session, year after year, is the wrong way to do it. And in fact, it will only lead to complacency when those that favor all these rules and regulations for somebody else can say, well, we make exceptions every now and then if the interest is powerful enough and can get enough support. I also want to remind my colleagues that this is not a factory, this is not a university, this is not some institution which is going to produce net wealth, whether it's physical wealth or intellectual wealth. This is a stadium where people play games. And games are fine, but games are still games. And this stadium is not going to be built until they have a team. Now, the NFL is not going to expand. That's not the way it works. NFL team owners play their little game, pit city against city, pit Cleveland against Baltimore, pit Oakland against Los Angeles, pit San Diego against everybody else, cities like Jacksonville or where the Vikings are. Fan loyalty means absolutely nothing. Pit city against city for who can provide a fancier stadium. And it's a sad game. I'm a Trojan fan. I mean, they're not going to go to Berkeley. They're not going to go to Seattle. Fight on for USC. They're happy with the Coliseum. They'd like to own it and fix it up at their own expense. They're not demanding anything more. And we've got two great teams in Los Angeles, both USC and the Bruins right now. So where is this team going to come from? If it comes from San Diego, if the Chargers move out of San Diego, then all we've succeeded in doing is more exemptions for more laws, the public bond in Los Angeles to move a stadium 120 miles north. Is that really economic development for the state? I mean, Santa Clara used public money, $45 million in local property redevelopment money to move the 49ers 50 miles south to Santa Clara. Moving professional sports teams within the state is not economic development. It's checkers, and ultimately there is a public price that must be paid. I mean, I'm sure a lot of my friends here in Sacramento would not support an exemption for the city of Anaheim, where Anaheim to want to build from scratch with CEQA exemptions, with lawsuit exemptions, a new arena for the Kings, just to move the Kings to Anaheim. Anaheim isn't going to do that. They've got a turnkey stadium right now, turnkey arena, and the Kings can move there next year if they want. If they don't want, that's up to them.
30 seconds.
Finally, let's be honest about jobs. Yes, there will be construction jobs, but long-term stadium jobs are not high-paying jobs. Ushers, popcorn sales, ticket sales. You can make the same jobs arguing about a high-speed rail. There'll be high-quality jobs up front, and some are arguing that. But long-term, is it sustainable? Long-term, do stadiums sustain high-quality jobs other than for the players? In long-term, are you really creating any net economic benefit for the area of the state, or simply shifting around disposable consumer dollars that would have gone to the mall or the miniature golf course or the beach or the bowling alley, or instead they're going to a football game?
Thank you, Mr. Norby. Mr. Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I just rise to address a couple arguments. The first one was made from the gentleman from San Rafael, and to a lesser extent, the gentleman from Fullerton. I appreciate the environmentalism and the thoughtfulness of both gentlemen, but I take a totally different approach, completely different. One of the criticisms that we often hear about the legislature is that we're not adept enough to deal with crises. Many of you have served in local government. Many of you are familiar with the way that local city councils work when there's a crisis in a city. When there's a crisis, you get together, you deal with it fast. Well, folks, we're in a crisis. We have tremendous unemployment in this state. We have tremendous unemployment in the region. And we have a proposal that we stand to lose if we don't act. So I take a totally, completely different approach. I think that is our job, to act. I mean, listen to yourselves. We talk about, are we a nation of laws? Well, folks, we're the legislature. We set the laws. And we have a proposal before us, and we evaluate the merits, and we make a decision. And if you look at the merits of this proposal, we don't just have a stadium coming to Los Angeles. We have a convention center that will finally make Los Angeles a world-class destination for the conventions that many of you have probably seen in cities like Las Vegas and cities like Chicago. And yes, that does bring long-term economic prosperity to a region. Yes, it does bring long-term jobs and long-term tax dollars to a region. This is a terrific proposal. The people behind Farmers Field have put together a tremendous team. They have made this proposal with no public taxpayer input, and that's a very, very key thing in addition to the convention center. I also want to address one of the comments of the gentleman from Lancaster-Palmdale, and that was, well, you know, shouldn't we consider CEQA reform in this proposal as well? All I can do is ask that those of you who are considering withholding your vote for that reason just don't do it. To me, that's like saying, gee, we got this great piece of candy here, but I'm going to hold out till we get cake. Vote for the candy. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Nastandi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I speak to the merits of the bill, I'd like to first expose my own hypocrisy by voting last year for that previous stadium. I thought when I got here in 2009, I'd worked in private practice on projects that were held up because of CEQA. And I saw the negative side of CEQA, how you can basically kill projects by running out the clock. And so when the stadium exemption came up that year, I thought, wow, things are different. They get it. We're going to change CEQA. We're going to make a new law that actually promotes jobs across the state and improves the economy. Well, that was not to be. And that is my admission of hypocrisy of assuming that we had gotten it, we were going to do something different, but we did not. And to congratulate the author on a well-written bill, I think it is. As a matter of fact, it sounds or looks a lot like a bill Mr. Calderon and I had introduced last year that died in committee or was held in committee because Mr. Huffman's arguments prevailed that there are not going to be exemptions to CEQA across the board. We are not going to fix CEQA across the board. In Imperial County, that has the highest unemployment in the state, and I think Mr. Prez actually said in the nation, the highest unemployment. In Riverside County, the Inland Empire, where it's pushing 15% unemployment, many areas in the state, unemployment is unacceptably high. And there are many projects in each one of those counties, I guarantee you, are held up by CEQA. I guarantee you there are projects in each one of those counties that CEQA is killing those projects, killing those jobs, killing that economic development. Is that what we want? Is that fair? I get the theory of the bill. Yeah, it's going to help build a stadium. That will create jobs. Yes, I agree. Why would we not want to do that for the rest of the state? Why would we not want to do that? And once again, with sorrow, I thought we had gotten it 2 years ago, a year ago, whenever that bill was. I thought we all understood CEQA needed fixing. We have to do it across the board so not one person's job is more valuable than another person's job. But we did not get that. We are going to go, I guess, area by area, exemption by exemption, and I think that's a bad policy. Vote no.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. There's been a reference to the end of session relative to stadium bills. I don't think that we have the situation where we're trying to reserve this part of the legislative year to only do stadium bills. I think it's a matter of what ideas get brought up during what times. And in this particular situation, this is a time-sensitive situation. And although we're talking about a football stadium, I'm from Los Angeles and represent parts of the city of L.A., and I know very well that I don't plan to be going to many of these football games. It costs a lot of money to go to a football game, as everybody well knows. So my concern isn't football. My concern isn't where we're going to get a team from. My concern is not even the immediate jobs that are going to happen because of this effort of building not only a football stadium, but rebuilding a portion of the Los Angeles Convention Center. My concern and why I support this initiative in this legislation is because of the long-term synergy that this is going to create. We're not talking about just a job to do a project, and I think this is how we have to have our attitude relative to jobs in the future. We're not talking about people being put to work just for some short amount of time. What we're talking about is building an economic engine that is not only going to provide jobs in the short range, but provide jobs in the long range as well. The synergy around this economic engine that is not only going to have just the stadium, which is the secondary part of the project. The first part of the project is going to be rebuilding and modernizing the LA Convention Center. Along with the convention center, the hotel projects that are being talked about relative to the hospitality industry that's going to grow around the ability for a great city like LA to have great conventions there is going to be another source of an economic engine. So the hospitality industry is going to grow. So in order to feed those folks, we're going to need restaurants. The restaurant industry is going to grow. In order to have people come down there, a lot of it's going to be through public transportation, but there is other forms of transportation. There is going to be an issue of parking. There is going to be an issue of a lot of things. So in terms of this bill, which is absolutely critical, I think, is not about a football stadium, is not about a short-range project, but it's about an economic engine. An economic engine that's going to drive long-range jobs. It's going to drive industry growth. It's going to drive so many things that are related to this project. And if you have a project in your area that's going to be an economic engine, we need to look at that as well. And what we're talking about is not a CEQA change. What we're talking about is looking at this legal process and having an expedited approach to lawsuits. So whether we're dealing with this an area at a time, the reality of the situation, in my opinion, is we need to support economic engines that are going to drive economic growth in all parts of California. This is one example of that, and I urge your support because what we can do around this project, I think, is a reflection around what we can do on projects in other areas in the state of California where we're not going to throw CEQA under the bus, where we're going to deal with the CEQA process, but we're having an expedited manner to deal with some of the potential lawsuits. I think this is a win-win, something we can learn from, have even better policy about for the future. So let's get these economic engines up and running, put people back to work, build careers, make California be what it should be and what we know it can be. I urge and I vote.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And for those members who weren't here 3 years ago, or last term, when we debated the industry stadium bill, I just want to bring up a little bit of different fact patterns that's been portrayed so far. The Indian Stadium area and its developer went through 2 full CEQA processes, over 4 years worth of research on that area. What the bill was is to release one final lawsuit that dragged on for yet another year and a half by 5 or 6 residents of one city that I happen to be down close to next door as a council member. So I was very involved with that area, knew the history of the 6-year process. That 6-year process, we all admit, it's not working. The CEQA process here in California is not holding up this stadium in LA, but it's also holding up many hundreds of projects throughout the state that are stopping people from getting employed. Now, what's different with this project? I'm all for the LA Stadium as well, to have a shot at building it and competing for a team to bring jobs and economy here in Los Angeles, but I also want that same shot for every other county in the state, every other city in the state that goes through this with the long drawn-out lawsuit abuse that we all see on these large projects to get their ounce of flesh out of the developer. Many of those projects have failed because they don't have the endurance to last 3 or 4 years in a courtroom while demands are made all the time for different projects. Now, I too, my freshman year, voted for that first bill and say we need CEQA reform. What did I do? I introduced a bill for CEQA reform. That died in committee as well. Many other Republican bills to do CEQA reform, not to eliminate CEQA, but to shorten the litigious process at the end, to stop the lawsuit abuse at the end of a CEQA process, so we'll get these projects going. They have all been defeated. So all those that want to vote for this bill today because it's in Los Angeles versus some other not well-represented county, that's good. Let's take that momentum and bring jobs to the rest of the state. Let's take this example of CEQA process and apply it to the rest of the projects in the state. Let's make this a statewide reform so we can get Californians back to work and take out the lawsuit abuse out of the process.
Mr. Berryhill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I too rise in support of this stadium bill. Imagine expediting CEQA 175 days and all the people that are going to get put back to work. Imagine that. Imagine the joy on a child's face when dad says, I'm going back to work. That's awesome. Imagine how many people we could put back to work by simply expediting by 175 days the CEQA process. We really, really need, if we want to get people back to work in this state, we have got to redo CEQA, not get rid of it, protect the safeguards, but we have to get it expedited, and we got to stop the document dropping. Now, I don't like the way the process worked in this bill. I don't like any bills that we kind of get jammed with here right at the end. But at the end of the day, this is a great project. I applaud the author, and it's jobs. And it's jobs is what we need in California. We're ever going to get out of this funk we're in. And so I strongly support it, and I agree. We need to seize the moment and move forward with CEQA reform this next session. Thank you.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in support of SB 292. This bill disproves the canard that jobs and the environment must be pitted against each other. This bill shows us that there can be a win-win scenario when it comes to creating jobs and preserving the environment. I spent a lot of time working on this bill with a number of my colleagues to try to get us to that place where we can feel good about getting these jobs and not circumventing the CEQA process. This is not a CEQA exemption. There's full environmental impact review must be done. There is still judicial review that is going on in this process. I'm different than my colleague in Riverside talked about. He talked about how he was for the previous bill and against this one. I'm in the reverse situation. I wasn't able to vote for the previous bill because to me that looked like a CEQA exemption, or if we don't call it a CEQA exemption, it was vacating a lawsuit, which has, problems in terms of the CEQA process. This bill doesn't vacate lawsuits. It doesn't eliminate judicial review. It allows for judicial review to move forward in an expedited fashion. And in some ways, what's the trade-off here? A lot of times when you talk about trade-off, you're asking people, well, you're asking a business to say, well, let's say trade off the environment for jobs. Well, in this case, we're not. We're saying what does the developer, what does the business really want? They want time certainty. And what are we trading off in this bill? We're not trading off the environment. We're not trading off judicial review. What we're getting is we're giving the time certainty and the expedited process, and what we're getting is enhanced mitigations that have been discussed. And we're getting some additional process reviews that have been discussed. Enhanced mitigations like carbon neutrality, like lowering the trip rates. We're getting additional process reviews such as the arbitration that my colleague from West LA talked about, where we get some of the issues that often hang up the process on the back end. We're getting those issues moved to the front end so that the real disputes that come out, the real concerns about mitigations can be dealt with in an expedited fashion at the beginning. And we're allowing an additional process for review by having a special master be appointed to the court process so that they can process that paperwork. This is a process not just because it's a project that we like, but because we're getting some very tangible benefits both for review and for the environment that we can be proud of. So I'm here in a different fashion than I was 3 years ago on that bill because I think this is a very different bill, and I'm proud to support it, and I urge all of you to support it as well.
Mr. Solorio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in support of this bill. As you all know, we talk about jobs a lot in this room. This is an opportunity to help create jobs. I also am very supportive of the expedited judicial review. Quite frankly, if we were to ask our residents in our own counties if we want government to work quicker, the answer is always yes. But quicker does not always mean that we have to put things to the side. I think there are also a lot of important environmental benefits to this process in this bill. Also, I think we're looking for success stories. How can we build things? How can they be faster? How can they be more cost effective? How can they be good for the environment? this bill would help create a success story. Also, I know some of us think of this as an LA bill. I have another bill that we'll hear about later that some could consider an Orange County bill, but we're really talking about a region in many of these cases. Although this stadium could be in LA, I assure you that many of the workers would be from Orange County, from the Inland Empire, from Ventura, from throughout the Southern California region, as well as the visitors would be from throughout the region, and it creates economic benefit for the region, but really the state as a whole. So I think this is not an LA bill. It's not a Southern California bill even. It's a California bill, and I think we should support it. Finally, I do want to give special thanks to Speaker Perez, as well as Assemblymember Mike Fuhr and the other committee members involved in really figuring out how to make this be a pro-jobs bill, but also a pro-environmental bill. I encourage everybody on both sides of the aisle to do something in support of California jobs. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. It's an honor for me to stand up in support of this bill, which is obviously a bipartisan bill. When we look at urban California and the high rates of job loss and the long-term unemployed in these urban areas, and I would suggest that it exists in rural areas as well in this state, then certainly it behooves us to support an economic engine that can make a difference, an economic organization that can give a shot in the arm to our economy. I supported the bill last 2 years, and I support this one this year, and if there's one next year, I'll support it too, if it has the possibility of surviving. And why so? Because those of us who sit on this floor are part of an organization called the State of California. And if we ever looked recently, we are laying people off. We are cutting salaries. We are a dwindling economic institution. And yet before us, on the table today, is an organization, thanks to AEG and those individuals in the corporations who have put together the kind of money and resources to make this a project that does not need to run on public funds. And yet some of us are confused. I'm very clear that to support this effort is to put a shot in the arm to the economy here in California, and I proudly stand to do so. I also want to say that I appreciate some of the efforts that have been made by members of the Assembly who have been fortunate enough to work in to develop some policies that they think will complement the work that has been done by AEG. Their ideas of streamlining the judicial process will help to expedite this idea and make it a reality. They're requiring the implementation of specified traffic and air quality mitigation measures under CEQA is certainly admirable. But equally, I think, for those who are supporters of CEQA, you have to acknowledge that they seek to achieve carbon neutrality, which gives us the zero net emissions mention of greenhouse gas from private car trips, and they seek to do this by the end of the first season. In conclusion, I will say, jobs. My colleague from Orange County made a reference to the fact that all of the jobs aren't what they should be. And I will say this in conclusion. The union jobs, there are going to be many. And in those jobs, you can take care of a family and take care of yourself. But let us not smirk at the popcorn jobs and the jobs selling sodas, because we have a whole generation of future leaders in California, children, some of whom are in high school, most of whom are in college. And these little jobs that are peanuts to you is something very valuable economically to them. And in a nutshell, through this experience of working, they make sure that they escape being the long-term unemployed that we need to do more about in terms of policy in this very body in supporting economic development policies. And so I conclude to say I proudly stand in support of SB 292 as a legislator from California, and specifically one who represents Los Angeles.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker and members, I rise in support of this bill. For those who feel a little guilty about how they voted in the past and how they're going to vote today, let me digress for just a second and tell you a story. Richard Alatorre was someone who helped me get elected. So as a freshman, when he introduced a vacancy decontrol bill in rent control, he said, I need your vote. I need your vote. You need to vote with me. I voted with him. The bill went down. The next year, I authored the bill and needed his vote. And when I went to him, he says, I can't vote for that. I said, how can you not vote for this bill that you carried a year ago? And he looked at me squarely and said very easily, then is then and now is now. I support this measure to be consistent with how I voted with respect to the Air Quality Management District lawsuit that held up 62,000 jobs based on an accounting principle. I vote for this bill because I supported the CEQA exemption for the Industry Hills Stadium. Although it wasn't much of an exemption, it was a smaller project than was originally certified. But I voted for it because it meant 18,000 jobs. This project will produce 23,000 jobs. What jobs program does this legislature offer this year that's going to put people back to work? In meeting with labor representatives, they told me story after story of their members whose kids were in college, who had a nice home in middle-class suburbia, who are losing their homes and their kids have to get out of college. This is very real, and it's not just popcorn and peanuts. It's crane operators, it's iron workers, it's carpenters. It's jobs for everyone that are good-paying jobs. Now, I support, in Industry Hills, I support that stadium. This bill doesn't necessarily go against that, but I was shocked to read an article that perhaps that stadium is not going to go forward. So if that is the case, and it's denied by the developers, but if that is the case, then we need a project that will go forward and will make up those 18,000 jobs and more. I think this is a good bill, and it is a template, and I'm voting for it because of that reason. It's so simple. I have carried CEQA reform legislation in the past, trying to change this requirement, give exemptions over here, add sections. It never occurred to me that the answer was so simple. Just shorten the period of litigation, and this does by 100 days. And if you shorten the litigation, you minimize the opportunity for mischief. I think this is a good bill, and I think this is the beginning of a change in how we view CEQA, which I support 100%, and how we view our responsibility to produce jobs. Ask for an aye vote.
Ms. Conway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've heard a lot about jobs. I've heard a lot about the environment. I've heard a lot about the balance between the two. The district that I represent at one time, for 6 years we could not issue permits because of the exact problem that I think this bill solves. By setting a time frame, I think sets a great precedent, and I'm using that word precedent on purpose. I hope this project is successful. I hope this precedent that's set here can be extended to every county and every project in the state of California. They deserve a specific time frame in which to work, and for that, members, I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of SB 292. It's going to be very difficult for us to go out into the public and say we're for jobs and to vote and to kill 22,000 jobs. This is an excellent bill. If it was 5 years ago, I'd take another look at it. The CEQA issue is very important. It needs to be reformed, but let's not sacrifice these jobs in order to pull that off. This is not the time. The state is in a state of emergency. Our unemployment is the second highest in the nation. Let's just do the right thing and let's work on CEQA after this. I support the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Cedillo?
Members, let me join the chorus of those who are here for jobs, jobs, and jobs. I support this for 23,000 reasons, and that's 23,000 jobs. Now, like my colleague, Senator Calderon, I also supported the previous project, and I support them for the very same reason. As I've said before on this floor, on other proposals, everything we do has to be looked at through a prism of, does this improve the economy? It's a very simple proposition. And this proposal, like the previous proposal, does that. Now, there are those who say that this is not a perfect bill or a perfect process. And that's true. It's true. But I say, let's not make perfection the enemy of the good. We will argue that we are late in the process, and that is true. But we are not so late in the process that we cannot act now, urgently and deliberately, to respond to the situation that confronts us. That's a fact of the matter. I applaud the Speaker and his team for addressing the concerns that have been brought forth by all sides and finding the appropriate balance. Now, this bill doesn't solve every problem for every part of the state, but it does, as the Senator said, set a template for a very serious and rigorous discussion on the issues that are in this bill. I won't distinguish between the quality of the jobs, because all jobs have valor and have virtue. So when I hear from someone say, I'm an unemployed sheet metal worker, I want to respond to that person with a job. But I also know that selling popcorn and candy, taking tickets, working in advertising, marketing, security, cleanup, those are also jobs that have dignity and bring respect to the working man and woman. I perform those very jobs myself, selling sodas and peanuts at a racetrack. The jobs that will be involved here are going to bring dignity and respect to families. And let me tell you about the track record of AEG. It's interesting because they started with Staples Arena. It wasn't even Ann Schultz Entertainment Group. And those who were involved in the City of Industry project worked with the people involved in AEG to create Staples Arena. Every promise made has been kept. And then we went forward and built LA Live and brought restaurants to downtown and hotels to downtown. Every promise made has been kept. And now we need the City of Los Angeles, we need a convention center. Because tourism, sports, and entertainment for us is what wine is to Napa. It's what high tech is to the Silicon Valley. It's what ag is to the Central Valley. That's the core of our industry. Those are the industries that put people to work in the city of Los Angeles. And so we need to build this convention center, and hotels will be built, and jobs will be created, and we will move this state forward in a very real, measured, significant manner with a vote on this bill. And so I ask for your support of this very innovative, thoughtful, considered legislation that's on time. Because let me tell you, there are 23,000 people waiting to go back to work. There are people who are sitting and waiting, who have come up here to tell us, I'm an unemployed sheet metal worker. I want to come back to work. Let's put that sheet metal worker back to work. Let's make sure that every work, and let me say this to you. Do you realize that all the
30
jobs
seconds.
in all these projects are unionized jobs, living wage jobs? So, and we don't have an event a day in Los Angeles at Staples and LA Live. We have 500 events for 365 days. There is work every single day, 24/7, Monday through Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Cedillo.
And so I just want to encourage you guys to vote aye for jobs. I thank you.
Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. You know, I rise in opposition to the bill, but in support of the project. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think it's a great idea to get CEQA and to get the government out of the way of development. We can develop things. We have freedom. But it's not 23,000 jobs at stake. There's 2.5 million Californians out of work. Why is it that we all of a sudden discover that we can go beyond words when it comes to this football stadium? But we can't do it for the hospitals that are desperately needed in my district. We can't get Oshpod out of the way. We can't get CEQA out of the way. You know what? We did a solar project. We built one of the largest solar projects in California. It took 6 years. And you want to know how many jobs we got in my district? We got 0. We got squat. Why? Because the same unions that are supporting this project opposed that one, unless they could get all the jobs. And you know where all the folks came from? They came from downtown LA, and they zoomed right up the hill into the high desert where we have 20% unemployment. They drove past all my folks who are waiting for work, and that's what we did, and that's what you do. You have the power. You've illustrated you have the votes. You have the power to put California back to work. And if we pass this and we don't expand this to the entire state of California, then there is something wrong and rotten in this House. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Alejo.
Yes, Mr. Speaker and members, I rise as a proud co-author of this bill, and I'm not from Los Angeles. I'm from the Salinas Valley. But this bill makes sense no matter what part of the state you're from. When you're talking about 23,000 jobs being able to stay here in California, and you contrast that to the news that you hear about our Bay Bridge in the San Francisco Bay Area that got outsourced to China, thousands of jobs, billions of dollars sent out of California when we could have been using that to put Californians back to work here in our own state. And I think of those thousands of steel fabricators, cement workers, the building and construction trade workers that have been asking to be put back to work so they could pay their own bills, to provide for their own families, pay their car payment, their mortgage payment, put food on the table, put clothes on their back. That's what they've been asking for with this. That's what they've been asking from us. And anyone who challenges this project doesn't lose their day in court. They're actually still have their day in court, but they're put on an expedited schedule. So the attorneys will have to file their briefs a little faster, but they will get their day before a judge or a trier of fact and get their ruling on all the merits of any claim before the court. And speaking of football, Mr. Norrie brought it up earlier. I was very glad last week Cal Berkeley beat the Fresno State Bulldogs 36-21. But that's not what this bill is about. But it's about jobs around things that Californians enjoy best. Football and other entertainment, whether it's in Los Angeles or other parts of the state. We need this project to move forward. I ask for your aye vote for California workers.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. We've heard a lot of argument on this floor and a lot of debate, most of it very, very favorable. We all know that the CEQA process is broken. We know that many of the regulatory processes we have in the state are broken. And we also know that last year or 2 years ago when we passed the industry stadium bill, we vowed to come back and relook at these processes, and we did not. So this is about jobs, but it's about California jobs for all Californians. And I'm always happy when Los Angeles manages to score one, because they're close to Orange County. My people can go to work too. That's not a problem. We're not cloistered here. But what is the problem is that when one part of our state gets hurt by something and another part gets healed, it's not uniform. It doesn't look right. And I really hope that if we have concern for Californians working, it's all of Californians. And I've heard people here from broad spectrum of the states all supporting this that normally would not support this were it for something in Orange County. We are going to probably, or hopefully, have an Orange County ask for something that was wrong, something that was really wrong. And we want it to be fixed through the budget process. It's our own money. We're not asking for anything. Here, you're not asking for anything. You're just asking for a little exception, a shortening of a process. Well, I hope that that consideration will be extended, because jobs and funding of our cities, our counties, and revenue to the state is of utmost importance right now. California's got 12% unemployment. We need more people working, but we also need to cut moving things around, because the state will not be healed if it comes at the expense of our cities and counties. So I support this legislation. I would like to have held off till we could have had a little more reasoned discussion of it. There are some amendments. We don't know exactly what they are, but we would hope that they would do what this bill intends to do, which is to provide jobs in the Los Angeles area, to expedite the CEQA process, and to while maintaining what we need, the integrity of the CEQA process, to also provide that it doesn't get abused. And I would hope that Mr. Huffman, myself, others could get together right after the first of the year and start seriously looking at the process and see where we can come together as a state and make this work better for all of us. Thank you.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of this bill. I supported the prior one as well for a number of reasons. Many of you have talked about the importance of jobs. You've talked about our unemployment rate, 12.5% for the state, but in many of the building trades, 40%. That's unacceptable. We have talked about jobs in my 5 years here. We've done a lot of talking about it. It has been a frustration. We spent a lot of time focused on a lot of bills that don't create jobs. And a lot of those bills get more attention than this bill. This is an important bill, and it should have gotten more attention. And frankly, we need to do a better job as a legislative body focused on helping the economy, helping working men and women have an opportunity to provide for their table, for their family, and put food on their table. That should be a focus of ours, and it shouldn't just be a focus of ours in the last week of this session. I'm proudly going to cast an aye vote for this, because I think the work that has been done to talk about the balance between regulatory reform, environmental protection, and the need for jobs was struck here. And that work was fruitful, and it has put this bill in a position where I think it's going to get broad bipartisan support. But that shouldn't be a last week or a last 3 week or a last month discussion. Given the state of the California economy, given the job shortage, that should be priority number one. We've talked about the need for a vibrant middle class in California to have a healthy economy. We've talked about that. We need to do a better job embracing that, to see that the men and women in California who struggle, the two-income families, the people who came here from other states looking for a part of the California dream, the people who grew up here have a piece of that, and it's incumbent upon this body to make that a priority. I'm glad my good colleague from Los Angeles talked about the sheet metal workers, because on Monday I had the benefit of walking with them in the march in the harbor. And the look in their eye when they talked about this project, and it wasn't just about a football stadium. They knew intimately the kitchen work in the hotels and the expansion of the opportunities that they were going to have. And they saw that hope, and they were looking to us to provide the opportunity for those jobs to exist, not just on a stadium that may take 1 year or 2 years, but on the overall economic growth that's going to happen over the next 4 years as this project expands more opportunities in downtown. So as the same body that did away with redevelopment, which many of these same folks focused on, looking for the hope of economic development in the cities around our state, we need to pass this bill, but we also need to keep our eyes on the prize that we really need to focus on, which is an overall economic jobs package for the state of California. I hope when we come back in January that is a priority for this legislative body in a bipartisan manner. I'm proud to cast an aye vote and respectfully ask everyone else.
Mr. Nielsen.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, I don't know how Fresno State and Cal football got into this, but let me expand on that. It was a 15-point loss by Fresno State, but I would remind this august body that Fresno State has topped some very powerful football teams and ranked in the top 10 quite often. And many years ago, our college track team in which I competed were NC2A small college champions and third in the large colleges, beating Cal.
Mr. Nielsen, I'm going to remind you and Mr. Alejo to keep the football out of the debate.
Well, no, we're talking about stadiums, and their stadiums with CEQA fast tracking should occur in Salinas and in Fresno and in Redding. I think that's my point. This is a good bill, and I am for the stadium. It makes economic sense. It is about jobs. It's good culturally. These are havens in our communities. They are economic multipliers. But I would submit, ladies and gentlemen, there's a broader message here. That which is good for stadiums is good for other infrastructure, like water storage, like bridges, like highways and schools. My fundamental point is this should be but a start. When we debated Assemblyman Hall's bill last year, another stadium, another good idea, another good reason to compact and expedite and make some sense out of CEQA. This bill follows on that good first step. But I submit, as we have other such bills before this honorable body, that will compact and expedite and make more fair and predictable like the excesses of CEQA that have developed over generations, then we will truly be doing a service to the economy and the workers of California.
Ms. Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I gave my word that I would support this bill, and I'm going to support the bill. But I really don't like the idea that this legislature picks winners and losers. And the way they pick those winners and losers is behind the unions that tell you guys what to do. So that really frustrates me.
I'm sorry, Ms. Grove. Ms. Grove, that is out of order. Please, that is out of order. You cannot make statements like that on this floor. Please speak to the merits. Please speak to the bill. Thank you very much.
Am I back on? So we have a solar plant in Ridgecrest, and they were killed by the CEQA process. A solar plant in Ridgecrest where we have over 25% unemployment. It was killed. Why? No PLA agreement. Second, we have a project in Taft killed by CEQA. Why? No PLA agreement. So I don't like the idea that we picked winners and losers based on who supports bills. I do like the fact that we are creating, and this will allow the private sector to create 23,000 jobs. I do like that. That is a good thing because we need job creation and job revenue. I support the bill because it is a job creation bill, but I don't like the fact that this legislature picks winners and losers, and it is because of the unions in this building.
Thank you, Ms. Grove. Mr. Swanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I've appreciated the debate today. I as chair of the Labor and Employment Committee, it's really my pleasure to rise and to support a bill that will assist with our severe crisis in job development and the opportunity for us to address our number one crisis, which is the dwindling middle class in our state. I think that it is the people and the families that are the beneficiaries of us taking action, finding sensible and reasonable solutions to development in our state. And I think that that is the real winner in this debate and this direction that we're about to embark upon. It's very important for us to realize that we have a dwindling middle class. There is a wealth gap in this country. And so this opportunity to put someone to work, to help them either pay a mortgage or to pay rent or to help their children go to school or to help restaurants develop and the like, or to bring tourists to the state, all of this is necessary for us to make an important statement and a contribution to addressing the crisis that the middle class is facing in our state. And so the fact that this is moving forward with bipartisan support is a very positive sign. And I think it's a great beginning, but we need to do much, much more. With 40% of the trade workers out of work and so many people lining up for jobs that are not there, I think that this is a good example of what we can do and what we must do if we're going to help California become the Golden State once again, and I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Speaker, you may close.
Thank you. Members, I appreciate the vigorous discussion that we just had, and quite frankly, it parallels the work of the working group that I put together to deal with all interested parties in this matter. When you look at the final product before you, you should take note of the fact that the support comes from broad cross-sections of the business community, broad cross-sections of the labor community, key environmental groups like the California League of Conservation Voters and the Natural Resources Defense Council. And it speaks to the work of the working group that had been engaged in this discussion for some time. The idea here was how to create a product that proved once and for all that the notions of protecting our environment and creating jobs were not in conflict with each other. And so here we have before us a piece of legislation that makes real 23,000 jobs in the short order, but has a transformative impact on the economy of downtown Los Angeles. You've heard about the impact of Staples Center and LA Live. Huge, huge catalytic developments that change the economy in that area. What we also have here is something that creates a template for us to look at. What we have here is not a CEQA exemption, unlike other legislation. It is an expedited judicial review process. Nowhere do we step back from the environmental standards that Californians hold dear. We hold those standards intact. In fact, we go above and beyond those and look at other mitigations that help to make the community stronger. Nowhere here do we limit the ability for anybody to engage in the process if they want to challenge any of the underlying findings in the environmental impact report. Instead, we create a process for mitigation before and hopefully instead of having to go to litigation. And then if litigation occurs, which it likely will, we constrain the timeline so that everybody, the proponents and the opponents, get a quick resolution and so that we get to a just outcome as quickly as possible. This is such a good product that it has inspired members of the other House to look at companion legislation that will allow us the opportunity to take a similar approach to other large projects moving forward. One of my colleagues said that we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and I think that that is an important admonishment for all of us to consider. This is a very good, balanced approach that protects and preserves our environment and the values that Californians hold dear, expedite judicial review, and get 23,000 people back to work while stimulating the economy in Southern California, which will have benefits for all of us. I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 59, noes 13. The measure passes. Colleagues, we're going to move to Senate third reading in just 1 minute, but before we have some guests to announce, first of all, on behalf of Assemblymember Tony Mendoza, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce some mayors from Honduras. We have with us Glenn Avila Goff, mayor of the city of Limon. We have Dr. Luther Castillo-Harry, who is from Gaurifuna. We have Isidro Ruiz, the mayor of Santa Fe. Delmar Duarte, the mayor of Iriona. Claudio Mejia, the vice mayor of Iriona. Jose Villalta, the mayor of Juan Francisco Bulnes. Roni Castillo, who is the executive director of Mamuga. And Hector Madrid, who is correspondent from Channel 7, or Channel 10. Welcome, mayors, and please everybody join me in welcoming these mayors from Honduras. Colleagues, your attention, please. We're going to come back to order in just 1 second. First, we have three more guest introductions. On behalf of Assemblymember Silva from Huntington Beach, we have three very important guests here. We have Jan Unsicker from Fountain Valley, Eloise Golden from Fountain Valley, and Doris Oftali from Huntington Beach. Please join us in giving them a big Sacramento welcome. Colleagues, I ask you to take your seats. We have a lot of business to get through, and we're going to move to Senate third reading. Senate third reading, file item 40, SB 509. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 509 by Senator Price, an act relating to instructional materials.
Mr. Alejo.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker and members, Senate Bill 509 by Senator Price addresses a major policy concern affecting California's public schools, particularly the lowest achieving schools in our state. While most experts recognize that purchasing up-to-date instructional materials is key to improving educational outcomes, school districts in California are currently prohibited from purchasing such materials from the most recent adoption unless they are also purchasing for each pupil within the school district. This is not feasible for more school districts during these difficult economic times. Many students in the lowest performing schools are currently using reading materials that were adopted in 2002, nearly a decade ago, and will be another 5 to 7 years before new materials are adopted. That would mean no new reading programs until 2018, and students will be forced to use outdated materials that are nearly 16 years old. SB 509 is good public policy and would allow school districts to purchase up-to-date textbooks and instructional materials for its neediest schools. Senator Price adopted amendments last week that removed all opposition, and this bill has received strong bipartisan support. I ask for your support of this bill.
Seeing no questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 58, noes 0. The measure passes. File item 41, pass and retain. File item 42, SB 860. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 860 by the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Water, an act relating to tidelands and submerged lands.
Mr. Amian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. This is the Senate Natural Resource and Water Committee's omnibus bill. SB 860 clarifies the status of minerals and mineral rights under various public trust land management strategies. This bill also ensures there is a continuum in the management of the trust lands if the granted agency is dissolved. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 65, no 0. The measure passes. File item 43, pass and retain. File item 44, SB 427. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 427 by Senator De Leon, an act relating to ammunition and firearms.
Mr. Fuhrer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill that takes an existing law and narrows it. It narrows it in two key ways. First, it would put in place meaningful consumer protections that don't currently exist in the law. And secondly, it narrows significantly the types of ammunition covered by the bill to focus on what law enforcement and in particular the Justice Department thinks are the most important forms of ammunition to take into account. So again, let's consider what's at stake here. There is already a law on the books that pertains to this issue. What this bill does is to assure that consumers won't be adversely affected by the bill, and second, narrows the scope of the bill so it targets that which the bill is aimed to focus on, and that is to assure that the bill's focus is on preventing people who ought not have ammunition from getting it, as opposed to inadvertently reaching others. Because of the narrowness of this focus and also the consumer protections entailed in this measure, I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I must rise to oppose this measure. Senate Bill 427 is another attempt by the author to infringe on law-abiding gun owners' rights. The author wrote the Senate Bill 962 in 2009, which was deemed unconstitutional in the courts in the recent Parker versus California case. This bill does little more than attempt to sweep ammunition primarily used in long guns or rifles within the AB 962 regulatory burdens. The courts have shown that actions like these infringe on the people's rights. Simply tweaking a sentence here and there will not change the fact. The courts have shown for individuals to have the right to bear and possess arms under the Constitution. It's an intrinsic right for all Americans. Making it more difficult for law-abiding citizens to keep and bear ammunition will do nothing to keep ammunition out of the hands of criminals. Those perpetrating crimes will still be able to do so, no matter how hard this body tries to make acquiring ammunition. All this bill does is make it harder for law-abiding citizens to acquire the ammunition they have a right to own. It's time for the author to go back to the drawing board and come up with another idea, and let's vote no on this measure.
Mr. Nielsen.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, this is another attempt to disarm our law-abiding citizens. Disarm, oh, well, they're not messing with the gun in this bill, the ammunition, without which the gun is nothing but an ornament. No, the true intent is to disarm. The gang provision is almost ludicrous. It has nothing but window dressing to make something look better. It doesn't. It's actually humorous. Most gang members don't heed gang injunctions, let alone conditions of parole that require that they not have firearms. Have you ever seen gangs be deterred from having access to firearms? Ammunition? Hardly. The most onerous provision here, provisions plural, allow the agents of government to come into businesses and require vast amounts of information that could paralyze, if not put that business out of business by requiring so much reporting. Open season by local bureaucrats to oppress and harass our local businesses. Another good idea. We're talking about jobs, are we? Ah, indeed we are. Here we're going to be harming jobs. But most of all, we're going to be hurting law-abiding Californians, making them the culprits, making them the victims of an oppressive bureaucracy that will be all intrusive into their lives, requesting and requiring all kinds of information that those bureaucracies will have to hire more people to store and monitor. No. Enough.
Mr. Donnelly.
Mr. Speaker, members, you know, there's an unhealthy obsession with taking certain types of guns or certain types of ammunition away from law-abiding citizens. I don't understand it, especially at a time when this body voted to reconsider letting juvenile criminals, who have many of which have committed murder, many of whom are gang members, to be let out early. What about the citizens? What about the law-abiding citizen whose constitutional right is protected and embodied in the Second Amendment? And it says that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We're not talking about armor-piercing ammo that can go through a SWAT vehicle and kill someone. We're talking about 22 rounds, long rifle, that every kid that is a competitive shooter uses. This is one more bad idea. And I echo my colleagues' sentiments. One of the fastest growing industries is guns and ammunition, but not in California, because this regulation and all the other ones by the same author are seeking to chase that good industry, that job-creating industry, out of this state. I urge a no vote.
Ms. Halderman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find this a very strange bill, and here's why. Supposedly the amendments narrow the bill to apply to ammunition most likely to target law enforcement, except for the fact that the ammunition cited also has a different purpose. .22 long rifle was just mentioned, 38 plus P, and my personal favorite, the .380. All of those rounds are most commonly used and recommended in self-defense courses. For those of us who would like to level the playing field, who are law-abiding, who are responsible gun owners, that's exactly who's affected by this, not criminals. They don't bother with registration. So I guess I'm a little bit confused as to why this would be necessary, unless, of course, it's an effort to get between me and a form of self-defense that I legally have the right to do. I appreciate your considered thoughts on this measure, but I would say, as someone who hopes never in my life to have to draw my weapon against anything with a heartbeat, if I am in that situation and you can't promise to be there, at least let me try to defend myself. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. You know, AB 962 will just never die. It's written, it goes through the legislature, it goes to court, it battles. We continue to see AB 962 in different forms and fashions. You know, I agree with the author that many provisions of this bill were not expansions. But some of the ammunitions were, and they were targeted. They were targeted at certain people. They weren't gang members, they weren't criminals, they were you and me. The .22 long rifle is a specific round of ammunition that is used by many of us when we learned to shoot. The .22 rifle at my house is about 55 years old, and every kid in our family learned to use it with .22 long rifles. The fact of the matter is, we get these bills every session. And as one of my colleagues from Twin Peaks said, that gun sales in California are going down, down and down and down, and ammunition sales are going down in California, and that's a fact. We continually make us, the good guys, the bad guys. Because I can guarantee you that not one gang member is out there looking and saying that SB 427 or AB 962 is really going to make my life difficult. It's really going to make it tough on me to go out and do what I like to do. But for that person who likes to go out and shoot legally and responsibly, it does make it tough, and it makes it difficult. And that's what we do here in California. And I'll end with just a quick story. In 1994, we had one of the biggest shootings in California history. It's the North Hollywood shootout. I was a gang officer, and we'd been taken away one of our biggest tools by bureaucrats, our slug shotguns. Now, the North Hollywood shootout went for 44 minutes. That should have gone for 44 seconds. Luckily, B&B Guns was open, and we could go down and commandeer guns so that we could defend ourselves as police officers. Now, this is an extreme, and I understand that. But every time these types of bills come up, I look at us as the law-abiding citizen, and I just wonder, have we been turned into the bad guy? I ask for a no vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Fuhrer, you may close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To hear the opposition arguments, you would think that this bill is relitigating an issue that this legislature and the previous governor already decided. This legislature agreed with law enforcement and passed legislation signed by the previous governor that prohibited persons, felons, who are not allowed to own a handgun in this state should also not be allowed to purchase ammunition. So the legislation that is on the books already requires that when one purchases ammunition, one provides certain identification so that law-abiding people who are seeking to purchase ammunition are free to do so, but prohibited people are not. And lest you think this is not a meaningful piece of legislation, in 2008, just in the city of Sacramento, 150 people who are not allowed to own a handgun tried to buy ammunition. Now, that law is the law. This bill before us today does not broaden that law. It doesn't prohibit people wishing to engage in self-defense from purchasing ammunition. What's before us today is simply this: a bill that says, given the existing law, we are going to specifically identify only a limited type of ammunition to which the bill pertains, so that it's not vague, it's not too broad. It was said that a .22 caliber bullet is subject to this bill, and that's a problem. Well, .22 caliber ammunition is used in .22 caliber handguns, which is the most popular handgun for purchase in the country. If you wish to engage in self-defense, this bill does nothing to prevent you from being able to do so. But it does prevent a prohibited person, as has been attempted in cities throughout our state, from trying to buy ammunition for weapons they are not allowed to own. The other thing this bill does is prevent the dissemination of the information that is to be provided to gun sellers and to law enforcement to other people. So the bill takes an existing law designed to protect residents, designed to ensure that law-abiding residents can continue to purchase ammunition, takes that law and narrows it so it focuses on where our state Justice Department has recommended it focus. And it's Justice Department input that has guided the author of this legislation in identifying a very narrow set of ammunition to which it pertains. So, to sum up, if you think that people who aren't allowed to own handguns in this state should not be able to purchase ammunition in this state, then you would have agreed with the previous legislature, and that's already the law. If you think it'd be a good thing for law-abiding residents that the bill be narrowed so that it focuses only on the most egregious forms of ammunition, and if you think that consumer protections are important on top of the existing law, then you should vote for SB 427. I urge an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 41, noes 28. The measure passes. We're going to briefly move to motions and resolutions. Mr. Allen, you are recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 78, please move file item 6, AB 360 Brownlee, to the inactive file.
Clerk will note. File item 45, SB 601. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 601 by Senator Hancock, an act relating to prisons.
Mr. Pan.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Speaker, members. SB 601 is intended to lay a framework providing better public access to key information about the performance of California's prison system by requiring the CDCR to develop correction accountability reports. CDCR is currently collecting this information now in a system called CompStat, which is developed and pioneered in New York State. And this bill is about making the information that's compiled in the system, CompStat, easily accessible to the public. The bill will provide a tangible tool for the public to see what is going on in our institutions and move us closer to accountability that we all want to see in our state government. The bill passed Assembly Public Safety and Appropriations Committees with bipartisan, unanimous support and support by the Friends Committee on Legislation of California and SEIU Local 1000. I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Seeing no questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 70, noes 0. The measure passes. So we're going to go out of order momentarily just for something that is a somewhat pressing need. We're going to move to file item 101, which is SCR 17. Clerk will read.
Senate concur Resolution 17 by Senator LaMalfa relative to Prostate Cancer Awareness Month.
Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly. This acknowledges September as National Prostate Awareness Month. The amendments accepted here simply made more accurate and current the numbers who lose their lives and who contract this terrible malady. So I would ask you to join us in recognizing Prostate Cancer Awareness Month and ask immediate transmission back to the Assembly. Thank you.
Seeing no questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 66, noes 0. The resolution is adopted, and Mr. Nielsen asks for immediate transmission to the Senate. Back to file item 46. This is SB 567. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 567 by Senator DeSonia, an act relating to recycling.
Mr. Chesbrough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Plastic litter is a serious and growing environmental problem. SB 567 ensures that product manufacturers do not encourage the littering of their products by making misleading claims about the biodegradability of plastic. Under current law, manufacturers of plastic bags and food packaging cannot claim that their products are biodegradable and can only claim their products are compostable if they meet the American Society for Testing of Materials scientific technical standard for compostability. SB 567 simply extends the current labeling requirements placed on bag and food packaging to all plastic products. falsely claiming that products are compostable damages composting facilities' ability to ensure that material will break down properly and be available for resale. In addition, consumers mistakenly believe that littering materials labeled compostable or biodegradable is acceptable because they will break down quickly in the environment and not cause harm. This bill prohibits manufacturers from making false claims and requires that manufacturers of products that claim to be compostable meet the standards. There's no opposition. This bill is supported by manufacturers of products that meet the current standards because this will prevent their competitors from making false claims and undercutting them in the marketplace. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 44, noes 21. Measure passes. File item 47, pass and retain. File item 48, pass temporarily. File item 49, SB 459. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 459 by Senator Corbett, an act relating to employment.
Mr. Gatto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, Senate Bill 459 strives to reduce the incidence of misclassification of employees as independent contractors by creating meaningful consequences for those employers who willfully misclassify and those consultants who intentionally advise them to do so. We hear a lot on this floor often by people from all sides of the aisle about law and order. Colleagues, this is a law and order bill. SB 459 has been significantly amended in the Assembly to better focus on the bad players, those who willfully engage in this type of misclassification, to shirk their employer obligations to their workers, and to shirk their taxpayer obligations to the state. Every time, colleagues, that we allow one of these misclassifications to happen, we are taking tax dollars away from the state and taking tax dollars away from those who need them most. We often hear on the floor about enforcing existing laws. Well, we need to enforce our existing tax laws, and this piece of legislation makes it easier to do so by enhancing penalties for those who break tax laws. Assembly amendments remove the notice and record-keeping requirements placed on all employers of independent contractors. With these amendments, the author has worked tirelessly and substantially addressed the strongest area of concern expressed by the opposition in many industries, including the Personal Insurance Federation of California, the Insurance Agents and Brokers of the West, the California Insurance Wholesalers Association, the Financial Services Institute, the Direct Sellers Association, the California Association of Realtors. They have all removed their opposition to the bill.